here's a piece of math nobody runs on themselves. If you start saving $300 a month at age 30 and keep doing it consistently for 35 years at a 7% real return, you retire with about $540,000. If you don't start until you're 50 and you save $2,500 a month for the next 15 years at the same return, you retire with about $790,000. Same retirement age, less than half the time, 47% more money. The version of the math people don't usually run is the version where your 50-year-old dollars do more work than your 30-year-old dollars did, despite having a fraction of the runway. The reason is not magic. Peak earning years let you deploy materially more capital, and the tax code lets people over 50 deploy more than that, on a window of time that has a hard expiration date attached to it. The payday routine you needed in your 30s was a real routine. The payday routine you need in your 40s and 50s is a different routine. And the moves that compress the math get bigger and more consequential the closer you get to retirement. Today I'm going to walk you through what the math actually says about how your paycheck builds wealth at different ages. The framing you usually sees, its spend-tense REIT payday should trigger regardless of where you are in the curve, and the 2 time-limited tax windows that quietly disappear if you don't notice them before they close. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance for normal people, the kind that actually works instead of the kind that sells you a course. No motivational fluff, no fantasy returns, just what the math actually does over time. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe. Today, the 4 moves that turn a paycheck into a retirement, why those moves scale up at every life stage, and a woman named Margaret in Ohio who's about to walk into the most powerful 5-year window the tax code offers. Why the same paycheck does different work at different ages. Most personal finance content collapses every paycheck into the same advice. The advice is fine, but it misses what the math actually shows about when dollars do their work. Here's the structural reality. A dollar saved at 30 has 35 years to compound at 7%. By the time you retire, that single dollar has grown to about $10.70. A dollar saved at 50 has 15 years to compound at the same rate. By retirement, that dollar has grown to about $2.75. On a per dollar basis, the 30-year-old's dollar does almost 4 times more work than the 50-year-old's dollar. The case for early saving is real, and the math is real. What the per dollar comparison hides is that the 30-year-old is not saving anything close to the same dollar amount as the 50-year-old. Per the most recent census 2024 data released last September, median household income for householders aged 25 to 34 is around $88,000 a year. By the 45 to 54 bracket, peak earning years in the United States, the median household income climbs to $116,800. That's a 33% increase in raw income alone, before accounting for the fact that major fixed expenses often stabilize in your late 40s and 50s as mortgages get paid down and children age out, freeing up cash flow that wasn't available a decade earlier. Then layer on the IRS allowing workers over 50 to contribute an additional $8,000 per year to their 401k, above the standard limit, plus an additional $11,250 for those between 60 and 63 under the SEC 2.0 Super Catch-up provision. The combination of higher income, higher available cash flow, and higher tax advantage ceiling means the dollar amounts flowing through a payday at 50 can be 5 times or more the dollar amounts that flowed at 30, so the math actually plays out this way. Your 30-year-old paychecks are valuable per dollar, but small in absolute terms. Your 50-year-old paychecks are less valuable per dollar but materially larger in absolute terms. The crossover point is somewhere in the middle of your career, and most people stop paying attention to their paycheck routine right around the moment the math is tilting most in their favor. The 4 moves I'm about to walk you through are the same 4 moves at every age. What changes is the dollar amount, the priority within each move, and the specific tax windows that activate or expire. Move 1. Capture the employer match. This is the universally applicable rule, true at 30, at 40, at 50, and at 60. If your employer offers a 401k match, the dollars you have to contribute to capture it are functionally 100% return on day 1. Vanguard's most recent How America Saves data shows that the median employer match in U.S. plans is 4% of pay On a median household income of $83,730 from the 2024 census, that's about $3,300 a year of company money that you only get if you contribute enough yourself to trigger it. The number of people who leave this on the table is larger than most realize. Vanguard's plan participation data shows that roughly 46% of eligible employees in match plans either don't participate at all or contribute below the level that triggers the full match. Nearly half. They are turning down 100% return that the company is willing to hand them every pay period, with no investment skill required and no risk attached. If you do nothing else with your paycheck routine, do this move. Contribute at least up to the match. The next 90% of optimization layered on top of it doesn't matter much if you skip the only move with a guaranteed instant return. The dollar amount of the match scales with your salary, but the principle is identical at every age. A worker earning $75,000 whose employer matches 4% walks past $3,000 a year by failing to contribute enough. Over a 15-year career, that's $45,000 in match contributions alone before any compounding on top of it. Capture the free money before you make any other decision. Move 2. The tax advantage stack, which scales meaningfully with age. Once you've captured the match, the next priority is filling tax advantage space. Here is what 2026 allows. Standard 401k employee contributions are capped at $24,500. IRA limits sit at $7,500. For an eligible high-deductible health plan, the HSA limit is $8,750 for family coverage or $4,400 for self-only. For someone under 50 with family HSA coverage, the total annual tax advantage capacity is roughly $40,750. That's the capacity available at 35 or 45, and it is meaningful. At 50, three things change at once. The 401k gets an $8,000 catch-up that brings annual capacity to $32,500. IRA contributions add an $1,100 catch-up for a total of $8,600. 5 years later, the HSA layers on a $1,000 catch-up at 55, bringing family HSA capacity to $9,750. Total annual tax advantage capacity at 55, with all catch-ups and family HSA, is $50,850. At 60, the SECR 2.0 Super Catch-Up takes the 401k catch-up from $8,000 to $11,250 for ages 60 through 63. That's a 4-year window only. Total tax advantage capacity in those 4 years reaches $54,100 annually. Added up across life stages, and the picture changes meaningfully. The 401k capacity alone grows by 46% between under 50 and the Super Catch-Up window. A 35-year-old has more time but less annual capacity. A 61-year-old has less time but materially more annual capacity and a small number of years to deploy it. The practical version of this rule by life stage is straightforward. In your 30s, fill the IRA first because you may be in a lower bracket than later in your career, and Roth contributions now pay zero tax on decades of growth later. In your 40s, start ramping toward the full 401k limit and add the HSA if you have an eligible plan. At 50, switch on the catch-up the day you turn 50, because the additional $8,000 a year of contribution capacity is time-limited and compounds for the remaining 12 to 15 years of your career into meaningfully more retirement. At 60, check whether your plan supports the SECR 2.0 Super Catch-Up. If it does, use the 4-year window aggressively because it does not come back. Each life stage has a different number to hit. The most common mistake is to keep contributing the same percentage you set up at 30 after the catch-ups have opened up. The IRS is offering you a larger bucket. Most people keep filling the smaller bucket. Move 3. The bridge buffer. This is the move most personal finance content frames generically as emergency fund, which is the right framing for your 20s and 30s and incomplete for everything after. The bridge buffer is the cash and accessible flexible money you hold for two related but distinct purposes: surviving unplanned shocks and bridging income gaps in the years just before and after retirement. In your 20s and 30s, this means 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account. The point is liquidity, not yield. My own setup at 32 was 4 months of expenses in a savings account earning whatever it earned. plus a small starter brokerage holding short-duration bond funds. Total dollars were modest, in the low five figures, but the habit was the point. In your 40s, the buffer expands in dollar terms because your expenses expand. Average 45 to 54 household spending per the BLS Consumer Expenditure Survey is just over $100,000 a year, which means 3 months of expenses is now $25,000 rather than 5. The buffer also starts splitting in function. Cash for emergencies stays where it is. A brokerage account starts to matter because it gives you the flexibility to control taxable income in retirement, which is a question that won't come up for another 15 years, but takes that long to build the position to use. In your 50s, the buffer logic shifts again. You are now thinking about sequence of returns risk, which is a real concept. Once a portfolio is large enough that a bad market year can permanently change the retirement plan, a slightly larger cash position relative to expenses makes sense, especially in the 5 years before your retirement date. Brokerage holdings start playing a second role here as well, because you'll draw against them during the bridge years between retirement and Social Security, when keeping your taxable income low matters for Roth conversion optimization and ACA healthcare subsidies if you retire before 65. In your 60s, the bridge buffer reaches its final form. Cash covers the unplanned shocks. Brokerage covers the tax bracket management work during the gap years between when paychecks stop and when Social Security, RMDs, and Medicare all kick in. Same buffer concept, scaled up, split into two distinct functions. Move 4, spend the rest with intent. This is the move that almost never appears in personal finance content because nobody can monetize telling you to spend money. The math, though, says you should spend the meaningful portion of every paycheck on the life you have right now, not the life you're saving toward. The reason is that life is finite and money saved for a future that does not arrive on schedule isn't better than money spent thoughtfully today. What with intent means is that the spending portion of your paycheck is also pre-allocated. You decide in advance what discretionary categories matter to you, and the leftover after the first 3 moves flows into those categories rather than dissolving into miscellaneous purchases you cannot remember by the end of the month. In your 30s, the spend portion is naturally larger as a percentage of income because the first 3 moves are still small in absolute dollars. That is fine. Your 30s are when life experiences pay outsized dividends in things that have nothing to do with retirement accounts. In your 40s, raise capture is the discipline that matters most here. Every time your income increases, the reflex is to scale spending proportionally. The discipline is to capture at least half of every raise into moves 1 through 3 before adjusting your lifestyle. The first time I got a $5,000 raise in my early 30s, my actual monthly take-home only rose by about $200 after taxes. Half of that, by rule, went straight into the 401k bump and the Roth IRA contribution before it ever landed in checking. The other half I let lift the lifestyle slightly. Most of the wealth differential between 40-year-olds with similar starting incomes traces back to whether they did this. In your 50s and 60s, the spending portion can actually start to relax slightly as the tax advantage stack fills up and compound becomes the dominant force in your portfolio. People sometimes discover they have more room than they thought because the math has been working in the background while they were focused on the contribution side. The rule across every life stage is the same. You spend what is left after the math is done, not what is left after every impulse purchase clears the bank. Most of the moves above say available throughout your career. 2 of them have specific time limits worth knowing about now, because the timing matters and neither one shows up on a typical paycheck routine. The first is the standard catch-up at 50. The day you turn 50, the IRS adds $8,000 to your annual 401k capacity and $1,100 to your IRA capacity. This window stays open from 50 until you stop earning income. If you ignore it for the first 5 years after 50, that's roughly $45,000 in catch-up contributions you walk past. Over the remaining 10 to 15 years of compounding at 7%, that walks past represents somewhere between $90,000 and $120,000 of foregone retirement. The second is the SE Sure 2.0 super catch-up window between 60 and 63. For just 4 years, the 401k catch-up grows from $8,000 to $11,250 per year, taking the total annual 401k limit to $35,750. 4 years. Miss it, and it does not come back. Most people don't know it exists because it was only added to the tax code under Secure 2.0 in 2022, and the implementation date for many plans was 2025 or 2026. These two windows together represent the most concentrated period of tax advantage contribution capacity the US tax code offers. Anyone, they are sitting there waiting to be used by people who know they exist. Most people don't. Margaret is 45, office manager in suburban Ohio, $80,000 a year, single income household. She has roughly $80,000 saved across her 401k and an old IRA from a previous employer. Her savings rate is currently around 18% of pre-tax income, which is above the median for her age group. Margaret is exactly 5 years out from the catch-up window. From 50 to 65, she can shelter an additional $8,000 a year in her 401k on top of whatever she's already contributing. For 4 of those years between 60 and 63, the super catch-up takes that up to $11,250. If Margaret commits to maxing both catch-up windows the day they open, the additional contributions compound over the remaining career into about $216,000 of additional retirement wealth versus the same career without using the catch-ups. $216,000 accessed through nothing more than knowing the dates the windows open and adjusting the percentage she contributes to her 401k starting at 50. By the math, Margaret's current 18% savings rate on $80,000 of income puts her on track for roughly $900,000 at 65 without ever touching the catch-up windows. With the catch-up windows used aggressively the day they open, that ending balance climbs to about $1,100,000. The catch-up windows are the difference between a comfortable retirement and a meaningfully better one, and they exist for exactly the people who need that difference most. When I was Margaret's age, my own payday routine was at a different scale. I was 32, earning 60-something thousand a year, putting 12% into the 401k and another 5% into a Roth IRA. The dollar amounts moving through each paycheck were small. Discipline mattered more than dollars at that age. Catch-up windows weren't on my radar at all. They didn't need to be. The 4 moves were the same 4 moves. Numbers were just smaller. What matters is that the routine itself is age agnostic. The numbers, the priorities within the moves, and the specific tax windows activate at different points along the curve. The fundamental question is whether your paycheck routine is updating itself as your situation changes, or whether you're still running the same routine you set up 15 years ago, when your income and your tax advantage capacity were both meaningfully different. Your payday routine is the most consequential recurring financial habit you have, and the dollars passing through it scale across decades. The 4 moves are the same throughout your career. Capture the match. Fill the tax advantage stack. Build the bridge buffer. Spend the rest with intent. What changes with age is the absolute dollar amount each move handles, the priorities within the moves, and which specific tax windows are open at the time. The mistake is to treat your 50-year-old paycheck like a 30-year-old paycheck, or to assume the math has run out on you because the runway feels short. Your 50-year-old paychecks have access to higher contribution limits, larger absolute dollar amounts, and tax windows that are specifically designed to compress the most savings into the shortest possible time. Those windows are sitting there. Most people walk past them. Run the math at your own age. Pick the moves that apply. Update the routine when the next window opens. If this helped, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.